Wander Wealthy Podcast, episode 162. Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Wander Wealthy Podcast. My name is Tess. I am your host, and today is a solo show. We're going to be talking about something very, very important. And whether you are just starting out in your coaching business or you've been running your business for a while now and you don't know whether you're doing it right or wrong. And obviously, you know the title of this episode, but we're talking about pricing mistakes and goal setting mistakes. And this applies to everybody. So I want you to listen up and listen closely. Now, before we dive into this specific topic, and what I'm going to be talking about today is actually one specific mistake that I see online coaches, a lot of my clients personally make, and it both impacts your goals and, your mindset around your goals and your ability to actually reach your goals. And it also is a big pricing mistake. So that's why it is both a goal setting and a pricing mistake wrapped up into one. Before I dive in and explain and walk you through the backstory of this and what you need to do to make sure you're not making this mistake, I want to share where this ultimately came from. So 2 weeks ago, I launched the Online Coaches Pricing Workbook. This is something I worked on for several weeks, and it was really inspired by, years of my own kind of plugging and chugging, doing the numbers, hosting Payday party workshops, and going, okay, I need to bring this to the masses. I need to help other people price their services, because I remember when I first started out, and even like intermittently, every random quarter or just like at the start of the year, I'd be like, I feel like my prices aren't where they need to be, and I need to revise them and make sure that I'm doing them right. And I'd go through this exercise, but I could never get myself to sit down and explain and map out specifically how I did that. And I knew that when I was first getting started, and even in these times, it would be so helpful for me to have this step-by-step guide to help me price my services. And I know that you are sitting there also thinking, yeah, Tess, that would be super helpful. It would be really wonderful to have someone help me define that, because you know what I've been doing for the last couple months or couple of years? I've been basically looking at my competition. I've been, writing prices down on a piece of paper, seeing which ones looked better. I've been doing some research, figuring out, my price has to end in a 7 so people feel like it's more affordable, or whatever the psychological thing is with having prices end in a 7. But really what we've all been doing is taking prices, throwing them out there, and seeing what sticks. And there's so many reasons that this is faulty, but ultimately what is really faulty about it is that there's no purpose behind those prices. There's no profit baked into those prices. There's no concrete data holding up those prices. And when our prices get rejected by the person, the potential client that we're offering our services to, we think that there's something wrong with us. And we also don't know how to manage or handle price objections. So the pricing workbook, the Online Coaches Pricing Workbook, is a very intense, deep, and thorough guide. It's 38 pages, like I said, but it is so worth it, because it'll step you through everything that you need to know to be able to price your services, to be able to have the proper mindset around pricing and business in general, so that you can make sure that you're not self-sabotaging your own ability to build a thriving business. And it also details the mistakes that you need to avoid. And we've all made a lot of different pricing mistakes, one of which is the whole throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks type of pricing methodology. Is that a methodology? I don't know. I also walk you through in this workbook my tried and true formula that helps you calculate data-backed prices with profit and purpose baked in, so that you can take those prices confidently onto sales calls or out into, slapping them on your webpage, your sales page, and people will buy it because it makes sense. They can see the value exchange in it. So along with that, there's pricing tips, and my best tips, especially for those sales calls, those scary sales calls that we all have to get on and we're afraid of. They're all wrapped up into this pricing workbook. So you can get this workbook. If you want to get access to it, go to wanderwealthy.com/workbook. I promise you it will be the best investment of your time, energy, and money that you make in your business this year. Even during, some uncertainty that we've been experiencing lately, this is going to be the best investment that you will make so that you can get the right price and you can make sure that your prices in your business are supporting you and they're supporting your business and they're supporting your clients. There's even a part where I talk about how important it is to actually make your clients pay for your services. But today I want to kind of read or work out an excerpt of this workbook actually. So remember, I just shared that part of this workbook dives into some of the biggest pricing mistakes that I see business owners, especially online coaches, make. And I'm going to share one of them, which hand in hand, both is a pricing mistake and a goal setting mistake. So let's dive into this one because I think it is so important. Okay. The section of the workbook is called, and this is a mistake, price based on basically nothing. But what this ultimately was, what I originally was going to call it was pricing that doesn't get you to your goals. But I decided to change it because I wanted the section title to be more hard-hitting. But just to give you a little background, I've always been obsessed with numbers and the way that my personal goals break down. But I realized that not everyone thinks this way. I was having a conversation with a client, and this was early on in us working together, and she's very successful. She has built a business that gets her to a certain level, and with that, she's been setting goals that have been super aggressive to the tune of double the amount that she's been able to bring in lately. And if you looked at her year after year kind of revenue climb until she got to what we call the plateau, she was pretty much doubling her business regularly year after year. And so then once she got to the plateau, the first year of her plateau, she was like, well, I'm going to double it again. But she didn't. And then she's like, okay, well, maybe, so it was just a bad year, whatever. I'm going to shoot for that doubling of the revenue. Because she got to, and I'll just say it, she got to $250,000 in revenue. And if you're like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to get there. It's you can get to $250,000 in revenue. If you download the pricing workbook, you'll see that I can easily get you to six figures. You can price your coaching and you can easily get to six figures. But once you get to six figures, then it's just, okay, apply, reiterate, get to $250,000. But where she was trying to go was from $250,000 to $500,000. And, for some of you, you might be like, that's a huge stretch. For the others, you're like, okay, I'm on board. Let's go. Let's see where this goes. So the first year where she was at, she had hit her $250,000. And the following year, she was like, okay, I'm going to double again. I'm going to get to $500,000. She fell short. And she actually felt really short. She was still at $250,000. And so she was like, okay, year 2 of being at $250,000, my goal by the end of this year is to be at $500,000 because I know I've been able to double. I want to double it. Maybe that first year there was just something going on. So she tries again and she falls short again. And she does this on repeat for a few years. And that's why we call it the plateau. She was climbing, and then it just started tapering off. And she'd been hovering around that $250,000 mark. And so when we talked about what was going on, what we really did was break down her offerings and her prices. And what we realized was that her offerings that she had at the price point that she had, at the capacity that she could make those offerings at, they didn't add up. And where I think a lot of people fall short when it comes to their revenue goals and their prices, because, well, here's the deal. Your pricing makes up your revenue, right? Like you have underlying offerings, you smack a price tag on it, and then people have to pay for those offerings. And so when they pay you, then you just add up all of those payments over the full year. We'll call it a year for our revenue goals. So all those payments over the course of the year equals the total revenue you bring in over the course of the year, right? It's fairly simple when we break it down like that, but we don't always think about it like that. And that is the problem. is that we, as, emotional human beings who are slightly irrational most of the time, we sit down and we go, okay, for pricing of this service, I think X feels good. Throw it at the wall, see what sticks, right? And then when we're like, oh, I need to set goals. How much do I want to bring in this year? We're like, well, I brought in 250 last year. I can double it again. But we don't think through what needs to happen in the basis, in the foundation of our business to make sure that that doubling in revenue can happen. And so with my client, what we recognized is the offerings that she was putting out at the price that she was putting them out at, and the amount of offerings she could make would never, ever logically get her to that $500,000 mark. And I will say that I don't think you need to go, okay, my revenue goal is X, and so therefore A times B, A being the offerings and B being the price, has to equal X, right? I call it leave a little room for magic. And so if A times B, your offerings times your price point of those offerings, equals X minus 10% of X, right? Like you're 10% short or even 25% short, that's okay, because you might be able to make up that 10 to 25% from, we'll call it magic, but really what is that? Like new random opportunities that come your way. Maybe you get a chance to do a sponsored post on your Instagram, or maybe someone pays you for a speaking gig. These aren't our fixated, this is how I'm bringing in my revenue streams, but they're kind of one-off magical happenstance things that do bring in revenue. And I think it's totally fine to leave a little space for that. But when we're falling short by 50%, that's where we really need to go, okay, we have a pricing, an offering, or a target audience problem. Meaning that the offerings that we're either not charging them high enough, we're not pricing them high enough to get to that revenue point, or we aren't able to make enough offerings at that price point to get to that revenue point. Or we're not, maybe you're not able to charge them high enough because the type of clientele that you currently have wouldn't be able to pay for a higher price point, making the same number of offerings that you've always been making. And therefore, you're not able to get to that price point. So it doesn't break down appropriately. Your price multiplied by your offerings, multiplied by the number of times per year you can make this offering, or, if we're talking about one-on-one clients, like how many one-on-one clients can you reasonably support in a year? And what is the price point of that one-on-one client package? And then if you multiply the price point by the number of clients you can reasonably support in a year, you should get to at least close to, if not at, your revenue goal. Or that might ultimately be your revenue goal. The way that I do it in my pricing workbook and the way that I teach my clients is to come up with their revenue goal and then break it down into their price points, because that's how we can back into their pricing. I'm actually going to talk about this in the next solo show. But what I want you to recognize is, have I been setting revenue goals and setting prices in their own, segmented, compartmentalized way? Meaning you're setting your revenue goals and then you're setting your price points, but you're not thinking about how they impact each other. Because the truth is, they way heavily impact each other. Your prices make up your revenue. And if you want to live a certain type of lifestyle, if you want to run a certain type of business, you need to reach a certain level of revenue, and that might be able to help inform your prices. So they got to go one way or the other, or both ways, but you can't set your revenue goals for the year and you can't set your prices for this year's offerings, whatever you're offering to your clients. You can't set them in separate containers and think that it's going to magically work itself out. Because as much as I like to leave room for magic, as much as I know that we will randomly come on and be able to, make a random $10,000. I'm not kidding, it happens. Or be able to book a couple of speaking gigs that bring in a couple $1,000s each time. I'm not kidding, it happens. Those things happen. But we can't rely on 50% of our revenue goals to be made up by that. So when I talk about price based on basically nothing, or pricing that doesn't get you to your goals, that's exactly what I'm talking about. We so often make this pricing mistake where we just pick a price that we think feels good, or we think maybe our clients will be able to afford, or, we just like cross our fingers and close our eyes and kick something out there. And it's built on nothing. There's no basis for that price point. And it definitely isn't adding up to get us to our goals. So I don't want you to make that mistake. And I want you to know that there's no problem that, there's nothing wrong with going, oh my gosh, I did not realize that I was making that mistake. And it is really basic, but I want you to know that building a business, it messes with you. It makes you see all the things that you have been secretly insecure about for so long. And now you have to put yourself out there for the first time. And so there's so much of our ability to think rationally or to think logically through problems. It just starts to deteriorate a little bit when you're running a business, because you're feeling really pressed for time, or you're feeling this amount of scarcity in terms of the amount of money that you need to make, or you're feeling under pressure or afraid of being able to put yourself out there. And I totally get it. I totally see you. I totally know where you're coming from. And I totally understand why making some of these mistakes just ends up happening. And we're not able to see the forest through the trees, right? So let me explain what my client and I did to deconstruct her issue and what you can maybe do too if you're bumping up against. So the first thing that we did was we looked at that big revenue goal that she had set for herself, that $500,000 mark. And we identified whether this is what I like to call a vanity number, which is just a number you set because it would make you feel good, which really when we deconstruct this, it never actually ends up making us feel good. But we always think once I do this, that's when I'm going to feel accepted and happy and worthy. And so I call those vanity numbers. If you just set a number because you think it sounds cool and you think that's when you'll officially allow yourself to have made it, it's a vanity number. So what we did with her was that we uncovered what her actual purpose-driven revenue goal is. And this is something we do inside of the Payday Party workshop, is we define that purpose-driven revenue goal. I had the roadmap up for a long time that helps you get to your purpose-driven revenue goal. And I've talked a lot about purpose-driven revenue goals before. But what this goal does is ultimately set a number that is built out of purpose. It's built off of the lifestyle that you want to live, that you dream to live, the goals that you want to achieve for yourself, both personally and in your business. And we essentially back into a revenue goal based on that, so that she could have what my client and I did was build a revenue goal for her that gave her this meaningful purpose to strive for when it came to reaching those revenue marks. Then what my client and I looked at was uncovering what my client's capacity was to serve her clients in the way that she had been serving them. And we found that the capacity that she could serve her current clientele at the current price point wasn't enough to hit even her new purpose-driven revenue goals. So she would either have to increase that capacity somehow, which was going to be really difficult considering, how much it was already taking up of her time and energy, or she was going to have to raise her prices. So when we looked at that, we had to identify, was her current clientele going to be able to absorb those prices, going to be able to see that they, would be able to get the value out of it, that they were going to be investing into it. And we ultimately determined that her current clientele actually wasn't the right clientele if she was going to bring her very experienced expertise to them and charge a higher price point. They weren't ready for that. And so when we looked at her offering as a whole, we recognized that raising her price point with her current audience at the current offering, it just wasn't going to be the best fit. So instead, we deconstructed her offerings and changed up what she was ultimately offering and who she was offering it to, so that it would be a higher end type of offering to a higher end type of clientele that she was ready and open to working with. And this would help her much more easily and effectively reach the revenue goals that were now backed by purpose. So this is what I do with my clients, is we really break things down to make sure that it works, and we identify who the right fit is ultimately that they need to be stepping in and serving, and what those people need and want. And that really helps us easily identify and fill those value gaps so that we can get the right price point that ultimately circles back and helps my clients reach their goals. So it's like a really intricate puzzle when it comes to building a business. It's this really intricate puzzle that you need to make sure that everything that you do feeds into each other. And I think a lot of people miss that because they lean a little bit too much, which I'm all for becoming, leaning into the spiritual, leaning into the emotions. But sometimes we allow our emotions to overtake us and overtake our business making decisions. And, your emotions and even like the most spiritual side of you is not the most effective at running and building and scaling a business. And so I love to combine the two. I love the spiritual part. I love, making sure that you're in the right mindset and being able to approach your business in a way that you can really feel into your higher level self. But I also think it's so, so important that we get down to business with the numbers and we make sure that we're thinking critically, we're thinking rationally and logically about how to build the business that can ultimately get us to our goals. So this is something I'm really passionate about, obviously. And it's also a big mistake that I see people make. And I want so many of my clients, future and present, and even just my audience members, whether you ever become clients or not, to make sure that you're not making this mistake that is going to continue to keep you falling short. And the last thing that I'll mention is just that when we continue to fall short of our goals year over year, that really does a number on your confidence and on your willingness and ability to see this business that you're building as something that fulfills you, that fills you up, that you are able to show up and serve in. And it can really just chip away at you. And that is destructive. That's something that we need to, if we go without thinking logically about our business, but we can't quite understand why we could keep falling short, then we're sending ourselves mixed messages around the fact that, there's something wrong with us, when in reality, there's something wrong with the business model. And that is way better. It's a way better thing to realize, oh, this is a problem that I can fix. It's not a you problem, it's a model problem, and we can fix that. And oftentimes it just takes the right coach with the right model to plug and chug your numbers into to help you see what maybe you haven't been able to see for so long. And again, it's not your fault. It's not your issue that you've been blind to this, other than sometimes we just get so caught up in our business that we need a third party to come in and shine the light on our gaps and our weak spots. So I hope that this episode has helped shine some light on maybe your weak spots where you've been making mistakes. And I really hope you guys get your hands on the Online Coaches Pricing Workbook. Remember, you can go to wanderwealthy.com/workbook to get your hands on it. Go peel through all of the content there. There's so much good stuff, along with the fact that you get that step-by-step formula to set your prices. You're also going to get so many additional benefits that are going to help you program your mind, make sure you have the right mindset when it comes to pricing, you're avoiding all the other pricing mistakes, and you're prepared and have all of my awesome tips, tricks, and techniques when it comes to going into those sales calls and sharing your prices, talking about money. You guys know that that's my favorite subject. So wanderwealthy.com/workbook to get your hands on that. And I'd love it if you guys enjoyed this episode, go ahead and share it on the gram, tag me at Tess_Wicks. And if you get your hands on the pricing workbook, send me an email or DM me on Instagram to let me know if A, you have any questions, B, you have any feedback, or C, you just want to tell me what you think of it, because I really want to make sure this workbook is the absolute bee's knees for you. It is super helpful. It is juicy. It's got everything you've been wanting and looking for, and it is kind of a working document in that way that if people are like, hey, here's something that I think might be missing or that I'm really struggling to wrap my head around, I can then critique the workbook or edit the workbook in a way that makes sure that we get all of your questions answered. So reach out to me once you get your hands on it. Remember, wanderwealthy.com/workbook to grab that, and then at me at Tess_Wicks on Instagram. That's my favorite place to hang out, and I will send you a voice memo to walk you through any questions you have, or just send you so much love for downloading the workbook and letting me know what you think. So thank you again for another amazing time with me and you. I hope that this has been helpful for you. I hope you're all staying happy and healthy out there during this strange time that we're in. And until next time, I hope you wander wealthy.